if you were the builder, have a conversation to be clear with the requester that you are building what they want you to build. Between requester and builder, there has to be clarity.
Welcome to Children with Tech Meets the World, where CTOs share the tales and the comments. So startups do big names and their visions unfold. How many CTOs will share their stories untold?
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the How Many CTOs Does It Take podcast. I'm Brad Hefta-Gaub, and this is my co-host.
Porad.
All right, and Scott, today, what do we want to talk about today? You pinged me recently and mentioned something about requirements and the frustrations that can come from poorly written requirements, or tell me more about what was on your mind about requirements.
I'll tell you what's on my mind. Brad, I am doing a renovation project at my house.
Wait, we're talking software or we're talking hardware here?
Well, we're talking both, actually. That's what's really interesting about it. I'm doing a renovation project at my house. And it involves we're getting new kitchen cabinets. So they took out all the old kitchen cabinets, they're putting in new kitchen cabinets. And every Monday we meet. Now they started this project 3 weeks ago. And every Monday we meet with the builder, the carpenters, they have a list of questions and stuff to ask us. And what has been really surprising to me, they've got some blueprints. They're not blueprints, but drawings of what's supposed to happen, including all these cabinets and how they're all supposed to fit together and all work. And it has been fascinating to me the level of detail they are going through in advance to avoid problems. So last week, most recent meeting, we're sitting there and the builder, his name's Zach, he said, okay, you see this corner where there's like two countertops that come together in a corner, and the way these cabinets are, they're not going to be able to open all the way because the hinge is going to get pinched, right? And so you're going to have these two cabinets that you are going to be unhappy because neither of these will open all the way because of the way this is designed. And he had some ways we could solve it. But I thought it was so fascinating how much time he spent studying drawings. And these are just drawings drawn by an architect. They're not real world mock-ups or anything. Just looking at them, thinking about like each little detail. How is this going to open? How is this drawer going to work? How is this cupboard cabinet going to work? Or not cupboard cabinet. How is this cupboard door going to open? He clearly had spent time thinking through every detail of these pictures before they started building, and then brought it to us with his concerns and saying, look, I've observed these things, and these are challenges that you're going to run into, because clearly he knew that once we order these cabinets and have them delivered and he goes to install them, it's going to be very expensive to deal with it.
Yeah.
First of all, we paid for a cabinet that we can't take back. Second is it's going to stop his whole project, right? He's got a whole schedule of contractors and subcontractors and all these people all queued up to make his whole thing really efficient. And if all of a sudden he has to stop for 2 weeks because our cabinet doors don't open right in this one corner, or if you get to the end of the project where the cabinets are in, the countertops are in, the floors have been done, everything's done, and we go back into our brand new kitchen and we're like, well, Zach, this door sucks. This thing sucks. I can only open it like 3/4 of the way because you can see it hits this other one. I just thought that was fascinating.
I'll tell you, you're glad you've got that contractor that's paying that much detail, because I have horror stories from times I've done remodels where, like, the two examples I can think of is a little mini fridge in the wet bar area of the media room where they didn't measure the overhang of the countertop correctly, and the door for the mini fridge wouldn't open because the countertop was overhanging into the door, and so they had to
Yeah.
solve that problem after the fact because the fridge was built and the countertop was made. It's like, it was horrible. And another example similar, where the toilet chosen for the powder room, the dimensions of it didn't allow the toilet to go into the actual drain that the toilet goes to, right? Like they had to, jerry rig a solution there, or buy a different toilet. And it's just like, I remember that toilet was sitting in our garage for like 2 months while they figured out a plan to fix the fact that we'd already ordered the toilet and it didn't work.
That's right. And so as soon as this happened, I'm in this meeting. And when I say it's a meeting, I mean, it's just us getting together at our house and talking. It's a meeting. And I instantly thought about our business and
Yeah.
software and just requirements. So this wasn't actually a requirement. I mean, we just had a requirement that there's two cabins in the corner, but I
Well,
just
and that
thought,
you could open them.
yeah, that is a requirement. But I just instantly thought about what we do. And I mean, I don't know if I reached a conclusion. Like I was just like, huh, maybe we should spend a lot more time being a little more waterfally and specking this stuff out. Like it was one thought that came to my mind. I thought about like, wow, look how detailed this guy's doing. And everyone in our industry is like, we'll just go in there and start coding, right? I just thought that was a fascinating difference.
Well, so it's so interesting you say that. Like okay, so the example of him saying like, "Hey, if we did the cabinets the way we talked about it, you won't be able to open them. Like they'll pinch each other. You won't be able to open them completely."
Right.
And to then step back and go, "Well, of course, I didn't feel like I had to say it's a requirement that I be able to open my cabinets completely." Like,
Yeah.
why would you think that that needs to be listed as a requirement? It's so obvious that that's a requirement. Do you even need
Yes.
to write it down?
Yes, that's right.
And I feel like I was like literally just today we were in a sort of like mid sprint demo on a new feature, and apparently like there was something that was assumed by oh the product owner assumed that it would be drag and drop and real time update of the drag and drop to everybody else in the app at the same time, kind of like they all saw the thing being dragged in real time. That was an assumption, and that was never written in any of the product requirements, and the developer of course didn't think to build that, but it was like, well, I just assumed. So how many times has that
Well,
happened in our careers?
I think the assumption is really interesting. And there, now here's a difference, right? Zach, who's a guy roughly about you or my age, he might be 5 or 10 years younger. He lives in a house with a family. He can make reasonable assumptions about how a person might like their cabinets to work
Because he
because
has
he has
cabinets.
a house. He has a house with cabinets. Whereas so much of what we do in the software business, I mean,
It's
even when
new.
we're not doing something novel,
Yeah.
it's new, and there's just no standard agreement for how these things should work. In fact, I was on a website recently. I wish I could remember what it was. And the navigation was so poor on this website. And it just made me think about like, there are so few standards for how anything works with software applications
Yeah.
that it makes this job so much harder. And it comes back to this assumption. There's so few reasonable assumptions like the cabinet should open all the way
Yeah.
that it makes our job harder. What conclusion do you think, is there something that we should take from what the home builder who doesn't want to have his job get behind schedule, doesn't want to have to redo the work, doesn't want to have an unhappy customer, so has taken the effort to go through these plans up front in detail and have a conversation in advance before we've even ordered the cabinets? I feel like there's something we should take from that in order to do a better job. I'm just not sure what it is exactly.
It's a great question, and I think that if you sort of like you already teed this up as a description of more waterfally in nature,
Mhm.
right? Versus I think what is mostly the norm these days, which is more of some variation of an agile process. I've spent most of my career in the startup game where we're doing novel stuff, and we're doing stuff where a lot of times we don't really know what we want, right? There's so much in the sort of like entrepreneurial space out there saying like, try to be able to move rapidly. Don't be too fixed in what you believe the customer wants. You need to experiment and give them something good enough to criticize, and then uh adapt quickly. Like that is a model that is adopted by a lot of software companies. And then, yeah, every once in a while, it can bite you where you thought you were, like I think when we had Greg Conklin on the show, he was talking a lot about like get really clear about what your core principles of your product are. Like if performance is a core principle, right? Then you better say that out of the gate, right? Because I
Mhm.
think he told a story once where it's like they were dealing with a system where the architect was like, "Wait a second, like." I thought you wanted, an RV. If I'd known you'd wanted a Lamborghini, I would have designed this completely differently,
Hmm.
you know? So certainly there can be cases where dramatic misunderstandings at the start end up painting you into a corner where you kind of like really struggle to achieve your outcomes. But there's so much energy right now in the space around, you know, iterate quickly, don't be too beholden to one idea because you don't really know what good looks like. And I think that's this wave or this gravity that pushes against the thing that you're asking, should we do more of?
Yeah, and I'm going to try and split the baby.
Okay.
It goes like this. Agile said, don't document all these crazy plans up front because you don't really know if the customer wants them. So build something and see if they want it. And what we're really saying is something different, which is if you are the builder, have a conversation to be clear with the requester that you are building what they want you to build. Now, the requester might not know what the customer wants, so they might want you to build it rapidly. But at least between requester and builder, there has to be clarity. And what I would take from this actually is not as I think there's actually a different prescription than being more waterfally. I would say if you are an engineer, if I were an engineer, my ticket that I'm pulling off the wall to go work on could just have one line. It could just say, go add a flux capacitor to the DeLorean. But it is worth it to take a minute, just like Zach did with my wife and I, Lisa, to look at that carefully and have a conversation with the person requesting it saying, well, this is what I see here. Is that what you really meant? Because your cabinet's not going to open.
Yeah.
And by the way, I've built software before, and I have a hunch you're going to want your cabinet to open when I'm done with it. So let's just talk this through. Right? We don't have to build a whole spec. Let's just have a conversation.
Yeah. By the way, I think that's 100% good good practice. In the current scale of organizations that I'm working with, very, very small scale, so I can kind of be in the room when those types of conversations should be happening. And 100%, those are what I am trying to teach and encourage
Mhm,
engineering teams to do, is to create these very open, frank, whatever you want to call it, but like, curious conversations between the engineers doing the work and the product owners describing the work.
mhm,
And also, wherever possible, involved in that conversation should be here's what I think you're asking for. Am I hearing you correctly? Right? Am I
mhm,
understanding what you're asking for correctly? So that's required. That's table stakes. But another part of that conversation should be, my instinct is it's going to be this expensive to build what you've asked for.
mhm,
Have you considered tweaking these pieces of your ask? Because in my experience, if I tweak these pieces of what you're asking for, it will have a different outcome. Like, it'll be less expensive. It'll take me less time to build it. For example, I can build it the way you're asking. I can build you what you're asking for. But if I take that requirement off or I add this other slight nuance, it changes your investment profile. Have you considered that? I think that is a super important conversation that also should be happening, and probably doesn't happen enough.
yeah, that's right. In fact, that's similar to what happened with Lisa and I in our cabinet, which
Yeah,
is
for
we wanted to have the cabinet a certain way, um, and I won't go into the detail. And he could figure out a solution, right? Or we could have it a little different. I think what we're really saying though is we're saying a lot of things, but another thing we're saying is as an engineer, to be a really good one, to deliver a high quality thing that your customer will be happy with, that's on time. And sometimes your customer is just the requester, it's not the end user, but just to deliver a thing on time that's high quality, that meets your standards of quality, et cetera. You're not an order taker. You have to be engaged in the process. It is a creative process
Yeah.
you got to participate in. You can't just pick a ticket up. The expectation that someone can write a perfect ticket implies that they have the forethought to say, and the cabinet should open all the way.
Yeah, right. Right. Exactly.
Isn't that obvious?
Right, and we've talked about, recently we spent some time talking about software development lifecycle, and one of the parts that we talked a lot about was this question of like, well, you know, and we talked about quality, and we talked about the idea that like quality begins and your software development lifecycle begins way upstream when you're just trying to figure out like what are you building, what problem are you trying to solve, right?
Hmm.
Not the writing of the code, but the description of the problem you're trying to solve
Yeah.
is critical. um, One of the other practices that I encourage teams to implement, and I'm seeing some good success with this in some of the projects I'm working on now, is that back and forth, that dialogue, that curious conversation between the future implementers and the ideators, right? The product team and the development team. You don't even want to wait. You would like to get that conversation started as soon as the ideators are starting to ideate,
Hmm.
right? Because if they can say, "Hey, we've been thinking about adding a new feature X, and here's some stuff we think we want to do with that," right? Right out of the gate, the engineers can start thinking about it and go, "Yeah, okay, you're not done with your full. You don't know your requirements on this yet, but here's some things on our mind that we're going to want to ask you when you finally do come to us with this idea. We're going to
Hmm.
want to ask you about, is it real time? Is it does it need to work on low end machines? Does it only work on high? Like the things that are going to pop into, because most engineers, as soon as they hear the description of the thing, they start to imagine how they'll implement it,
Hmm.
right? And they can start to ask questions early that then might inform and hopefully improve the actual feature requests, the requirements, before the, okay, now we're really trying to understand your requirements.
Well, and they can. I think this is something I see a lot. Uh, Engineers can push it further in two different ways. One is a technology way, which is like, I'll give you a simple example. It's not perfectly simple, but if else, so a conditional solution versus a probabilistic model solution. Lots of times someone will come and say, I want to build this thing. And if the customer does this, then we should do this. And if the customer does that, we should do this. An engineer might be able to say, well, actually a better way to solve this is to use an ML model, right? Because we actually might get all types of different scenarios of customers. And we want to respond appropriately. So that's one example of where engineers can bring their understanding of what technology can do to the table.
Yeah.
The second place I see it happening a lot, and I'll be honest, earlier in my career, I think I earned a lot of the success that in my early career, because this is something that I was good at bringing to the table, is a, a requester or product manager would bring an idea, we should do this. And I would be able to sort of say, well, like, okay, here's how we could make that generic. So like we can solve that specific problem, but then like the thing we build will solve many problems in this category. So I think I've maybe mentioned on this podcast, if I haven't, like the first three companies I worked at back in the early days of the internet, I worked on content management systems, right? And so that's very much someone say, hey, I want you to put a web page up on the site that has these words on it, right? And where I was like, okay, well, I can do that for you. I can build the system, and then you can put up any pages you want on this website, right? And that's where you take one category of solution and then extract it to a generic solution to solve it. And I think when product pulls in engineering and when engineering is involved earlier and engaged in the process, those are two attributes. What can technology do that you're not thinking
Yep.
of? And how can we make this generic to solve a greater set of cases, of instances of this type? I guess is the way to put it, right?
Yep. I have certainly seen in some organizations a reluctance in product teams to engage in those early conversations. So first, have you observed that in your past,
Yeah.
and what do you think
Yes,
that might be about?
I've observed it. I think I think it's cultural. And I think my initial reaction is that it has two aspects to it. One dimension of the culture is I don't want to spend, this comes from the product management direction. I don't want to spend a single minute of my time having my engineers do anything other than coding. So I want to get as much out of these engineers as I can get.
Which is clearly, that right there is a misunderstanding of what it takes to have engineers be efficient.
Yep. I think another aspect of the culture is from the engineering side. I don't want to go to a meetings. Can you just put it in the ticket? Can you just write the
Yeah.
PRD? I'll just put it in the PRD. I'll just do it. Just whatever the PRC says, I'll get done. And that reminds me of a conversation about, this is a little bit of a tangent, but it has to do with just writing things down. An engineering manager I worked with, his name is Johan Heller. He actually now is an engineering director at the company I'm at now, but he was an engineering manager then. He gave a presentation at a company we worked at a few companies ago, about the importance of being specific in your requirements. And he talked about, if you give me a requirement that says I want a square. Have I talked to you about this
Yep.
before?
Yeah, you mentioned this in an episode in the
Okay, well
past.
then I'll be brief and our listeners can go back and find that Easter egg. But there are many definitions for a square. Is it a square cash register? Is it a square box? Or what kind of square do you want? Is it a square? Is it a T-square for measuring things? So it was just a really visceral explanation that non-technical people could understand for, here's why as an engineer I need specific requirements. But I only bring this up to say, I think culturally on the engineering side, we have engineers who say, I don't want to go to meetings. I don't want to have conversations. I don't want to do this. I don't want to be engaged with it. I just want to take tickets and crush them. And
Yeah.
that's contributed to it also, I think.
Yeah, sure. And look, I think it takes all kinds, right? So I know there's some engineers that are most effective when they don't have, when they can just be given tickets and crush it. And I think we should try to find ways in our organizations to support those types of engineers. I prefer to see engineers that are really, really interested in engaging. And I think that, in a prior episode, we were talking about the Dora metrics around AI and this notion that some organizations have more user-centric, engineering
Mhm.
cultures, right? Like, to me, user-centric engineering organizations are the types where engineers tend to be really, really curious about understanding the needs of the users, and therefore they probably are more likely to want to have those conversations early on. They're less likely to be the just write it in a ticket and I'll build it type person. But that being said, yeah, I think you're right that like it's cultural. One cultural thing you didn't mention that I think I have observed, which I think maybe is good enough to call it an anti-pattern that we would want to try to fix if we saw it in an org, is a fear of um, it's not yet ready for review,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? Um, and or fear of I don't want to be criticized because I'm not yet done with
Yeah.
it, or I'm not yet ready for it to be
Mhm.
critiqued. I'm going to go so far as to say that's an anti-pattern that we should try to, if we identify it, we should probably try to address it, culturally. I mean, the earlier we critique it, the better, honestly, right? Like if there's a glaring problem in it, we want to find that sooner, not later.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I'm going to take a page out of my lazy developer playbook, which is sometimes when there's a thing I need to do and it needs to be more thoroughly fleshed out, I will actually intentionally do a very, very quick and rough and not ready for prime time first pass on purpose and put it out there just to get, I mean, just to get the feedback. Like, it's better to spend 10 minutes on it and just get something out there and start getting feedback than feel like I need to spend 2 hours or 2 days and then get it out there and still get feedback. And so there are moments
Right.
where I feel like, oh God, I don't even know what to do here. And I'm just like, well, F it. I'm just going to throw something on paper or whatever it is and just put it out there and just see what people say. And it's remarkable how effective that is. First of all, people are glad
Yeah.
that they're getting some, people are so good at reacting to things. They're glad they're getting something to react to. And it's super helpful for me because I'm like, oh, yeah, here's all these things I hadn't considered and it's helped sharpen my thinking. And then usually I can just pound out whatever the thing is because I've got that input.
What's so funny is I think was it our first real episode out of the gate, not after our sort of like why we call ourselves how many CTOs and introducing ourselves, was our interview with Marcelo Calbucci about his
FAQ.
PR
Yeah.
FAQ book. And didn't he say that one of his little magic tricks that he personally uses is even if he's he's labored over something, when he sends it out for review, he tells people it's a
Yes,
draft.
interesting.
And
Hack.
as you recall, he's if you recall that his reasoning behind that hack is there are a class of people who are less likely to give you candid critique if they believe that you will take it personally if you give them
Yeah.
candid
Or,
critique.
oh yeah, you spent a lot of time on this already. I don't want to hurt your feelings, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And so that's a so these are I mean, again, like we started this conversation down the whole question of like how do we get better requirements before
Mhm.
building things? And it feels to me like what you and I seem to be gravitating towards is, man, the more conversations we can have earlier, the better.
For sure. I thought of another cultural thing though. Before we wrap up, can I share the other cultural thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
You had mentioned the cultural thing is not ready for review. I think there's another cultural thing, which is sometimes, people bring us the solution they want us to build, but they're not totally dialed in on the problem they're trying to solve always. I mean, they kind of know the problem they're trying to solve, but now engineers often say, "Well, just give us the problem and we'll find a solution." But it's a half, it's in between, right? It's like
Yeah,
whether
totally.
it's the product manager or the CEO of the startup, or whoever, needs to be able to engage with the engineer on both the problem and the solution, right? Like
Yeah.
let's not only
Yeah.
talk about the solution you brought me, and I see the okay, here, go back to my cabinet example from the beginning of the thing, which is
Right.
okay, the problem he saw was these cabinets were going to have a pinch point. What's the problem you guys are trying to solve here? Well, this is a corner cabinet, and we want to utilize all the space. So we're trying to have one
Right.
of these pull out kind of lazy Susan kind of things,
Lazy Susan things.
and that's what we're trying to put there. It's not fitting. He's like, oh, okay, your problem you're trying to do is trying to maximize the use of this space. Let's see what. So we had to engage in both the problem. Now that was obviously self-evident because he's a builder and builds kitchens all the time, so he knew what we were trying to do. But with within software, it's that same thing. I think one of the cultural things is people come to engineering teams just with the solution. The engineering teams react and say that react with the pendulum swinging all the way the other way, which is just bring us the problem, don't bring us the solution. But actually, it is in the
Yep.
middle. It is you got to engage in both the problem and the solution. And it reminds me of something I just posted it on LinkedIn recently. We're at work and we're doing some creative thing, and this guy I work with he just kind of said, innovation is messy, right? And that's what it is. You got to get in there and just explore these things, and it's messy. It's not linear waterfall like we want, what we talk about. It is you got to talk about the solution, the problem, the solution, the problem. Maybe go think about it, come back, iterate on it a few times. It's messy.
Yeah, and agreed on that, and on the whole point of like understand your problem before starting
Yeah,
to discuss solutions. I think that's a there's certainly very good wisdom to be found in the do you really understand the problem part of the solutioning. I agree with you. I've seen cases where there's essentially a pendulum swing and a blowback, like don't ever bring me solutions, only bring me problems, right? And I'll come up with a solution. And I agree with you that that's equally an anti-pattern, right? Like
here's a
if
further anti-pattern. I think this is where a lot of that comes from. I don't. This is what I would say a product manager might say. They might not say it, but implicitly, I don't really know the problem. My boss just told me this is what I was supposed to do. Someone told me I needed to go put a flux capacitor in the DeLorean, so that's what I'm asking you to do: is put a flux capacitor in the DeLorean. I don't know why. I guess they want the car to go faster. That's what it seems like. I don't know. Right. So, um,
yep.
well, who wants the car to go faster? Why do they want it to go faster? Et cetera, et cetera.
They want to go faster or do they want to go safer? Are you sure they want it faster? We don't
Well, for
know.
anybody who doesn't catch the reference I'm talking about, it has to do with Back to the Future, right? And
Back to the future.
what was the guy's name? The professor. Whatever. He wanted to go back in time. Was there a reason he wanted to go back in time? Do we remember why that he wanted to go back in time? Or did he just want to make a time machine because he thought it was fun?
I think it was just he wanted to make a time machine because he thought it was fun. But then it turned into all
Oh,
kinds of trouble when you go back in time. You got the meet yourself
yes,
paradox. What happens if you meet your
totally.
parents and break up your mom and
Yeah.
dad? then you've ceased to exist.
Things get very messy.
um,
So yeah, I think part of the problem there is the requester doesn't always know because they've been instructed.
yeah. Also think, yes, 100% that happens. Uh, and as long as we're kind of like talking through all the cultural things, right? Like the key here is that as leaders, we want to be able to identify when there are these, cultural impediments to actually, making progress in the business objectives and meeting the needs of customers, right? And then so being able to identify them are a pretty important part of that. Um, and we can't look past the fact that a lot of people's ego is wrapped up in the solutions that they come up with, and that can happen on both sides of the equation. It can happen in the engineering team. It can happen in the product team, right? And ultimately, building software is a team sport. We need to encourage people to have a team mentality about it and recognize that the team as a whole deserves the credit for solving customers' needs.
It is truly a team sport. Engineering, product, design, data, all have to be working together to make this thing work.
So there you go. Work together, people.
Yeah, I mean, I think the lesson to take from all this is it is a requirement of a cabinet door that it opens.
To be able to open. It seems obvious, but sometimes we got to write down the obvious.
All right. Brad, it's been nice talking today.
It's been good talking to you. This is a good episode. Remember, what do we say?
Smash that subscribe button, rate and review, leave a 5-star rating, tell all your friends.
Tell
I
all your friends.
actually, believe it or not, this is a little bonus episode on our episode, met my first person in the wild who is a listener of our podcast.
That you didn't know?
I didn't really know them. They were a friend of a friend. And so there was a relationship there. So they probably, that's how probably the algorithms got it in their feed and they clicked on it and thought it was interesting.
Nice.
And the person is not a software engineer. They're a data scientist analyst type. They work at Starbucks. They work on I don't know what you call labor capacity management, basically scheduling people, but how to efficiently schedule people in stores. And I met this guy and he listens to our podcast.
Nice. That's cool.
So he's one of the faithful
That's awesome.
39.
There you go. All right. All right. Well, next week we'll have more.
All right. Bye, Brad.
Bye.
This episode of How Many CTOs Does It Take podcast was edited by Saffron Hefta-Gaub. Our theme song was AI generated by Brad. Please follow us on all the social media platforms at How Many CTOs Pod. You can find us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, X, TikTok, and Patreon, or at our website at howmanyctospod.com. And remember to rate, review, and subscribe on the podcast platform of your choice. Thanks for listening.